is the update on the WIPP recovery by Mr. Doug HIntze. So we'll turn it over to you.
All righty. We ready? You are lucky enough to have me because I happened to walk out of the Holiday Inn Express. So now I'm an expert on WIPP. I barely am an expert, don't even consider myself an expert on Los Alamos environmental cleanup, but now I'm moving out to WIPP as well. So I've actually been present for this presentation here probably 8 or 10 times, and I got any little bits of information, so I think I actually understand it a little bit. So with that, if you have any questions at any time, go ahead and ask me, and if I can't answer the question or make up an answer, I will go back and get the right answer from the folks back. So I got Lee here to write the question or write the answer. Okay, so here's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about, go through there, I'm going to talk about the, you can see the things that have been done up to this point in time, what we're doing as far as going forward to from the schedule perspective, and then some of the changes that we're implementing as we've gone through the last 2 years to correct the actions resulting from the event at WIPP. Just from a, I don't think it's anywhere in here, the commitment by the Secretary was that we would reopen WIPP in the December-January timeframe of this year. So that's kind of the basis for what this discussion here will be. Okay, so documented safety analysis, this is the safety basis that we have for operating the nuclear facility. And you can see that we approved it on April 29th of this year. It took 2 years to develop that, and you can see it was in accordance with this new DOE standard 3009-2014. And basically what the safety analysis is for every single activity, operation, facility you have there, you have to go and try to determine what sort of accidents could occur, wildfires, fuel fires, and you have to do an analysis of what it would be if you didn't have any sort of controls on it, what is the unmitigated situation, and then how would you mitigate those different accident analysis. So as you can imagine, for nuclear facilities, there's a lot of different possibilities, and so that's why it took that 2 years. Underneath of that, there are these safety management systems. For example, your fire protection. What sort of fire protection system do you have in there? Whether it's automatic release, is it water, is it different types? And so that's just one of the safety management programs that are underneath that safety basis that tie into it. And so you can see over that 2 years, there were 120 different safety management procedures that had to be incorporated into the safety basis envelope. All of that was approved in April. And then the actual implementation of all of those procedures were completed here in the May timeframe. From that, the next step is you take all of those procedures, that safety envelope that you just developed and implemented, and then you have to go and start practicing. And so that was from that May timeframe until August 24th, you can see. The folks would go down there and do the different practices. What you have over here on the right here, these two pictures, these are the TruePack 2s. These are discussion, the receipt of those. And then this lower picture you can see is where they're actually practicing unloading the TruePack 2s such that they would then be, the waste would be placed underground. So you can see there, one of the things is they had originally 8 weeks in the schedule. They had expanded it to 12 because of all the changes that they had to the procedures over those 2 years. And then you can see drills are one of those. You do operational drills down at the facility. Then you do emergency management drills that incorporate the entire area. You deal with the fire departments from the area, the law enforcement, and the external folks when you do emergency management drills. So that's cold operations. The next thing that you do is what is called a management self-assessment. This is where the contractor at the site goes and basically evaluates themselves on whether they're ready or not. And you can see there, Nuclear Waste Partnership. Oops, let me go back there. The wrong. Nuclear Waste Partnership is the contractor down there, and 2 weeks, and you can look at that. They review 950 documents, 200 interviews. You're making sure that the training that you gave to the operators, to the subject matter experts, is actually effective. And then you can see they looked over at 120 different field observations. They go down there and look at the people actually doing the work. Some of the findings, and so what that allows you to do is to take those findings, make whatever corrections before you do an actual readiness assessment or an operational readiness review, okay? One of the things that they had to do was to put in an interim ventilation system, okay? One of the deficiencies that they had that they revealed as a result of the incident was that the ventilation down below, some of it was bypassing some of the filters. And so now all of the ventilation, all of the airflow down there has to go through the heap of filters. As a result, the airflow that they have right now, you can see this interim will double the existing airflow. Well, the airflow that they had prior to the event was in a couple 100,000 cubic feet per second, and now, or cubic feet per minute. Now it's down to 54. It'll double to 108. That is significant, and because I'll talk about it a little bit later, is because you can't do all of the things that you were doing below ground before the accident right now. You are limited on the things that you can do. So that's what is causing the limiting factor for when you can start receiving waste, because you also have to make sure that you continue to mine out the salt down there. I'll talk about that a little bit more. So this here is nothing but a picture of, this is the new interim ventilation. So that is only for right now, and that'll work for the next couple of year period, because they have to put in a new supplemental ventilation. Because the airflow that they have there, even with this interim ventilation system, is not adequate to do all of the operations that needs to be done there. And I'll get into that a little bit more. Okay? So the next phase, you know, everything that I've shown you up until then are things that have been completed. The management review, installation of the interim ventilation. So now they're in the midst where they're getting ready for the operational readiness review. In the operational readiness review, we have the DOE orders, which requires us when it needs to be conducted, how it needs to be conducted. So there will be two parts to it. One is the contractor ORR, and of course that makes sense that you would see what are all the processes and procedures the contractors are doing. This is a formal evaluation that a team comes in there external to the contractor or the site. And so that's why it's different from that management, the MSA. And then it has a second part where that team also looks at the federal oversight and the federal operations to make sure both the contractor and the federal side are doing the things necessary for safe operations. And you can see there, ensure that WIPP will be operated safely within that safety envelope I talked about before. Okay? So now we're going to talk about the return to the waste emplacement, talk about the schedule and some of the things that are impacting that schedule. What you see here, and you can see it better on your sheets, this here is just a picture of what it looks like to have the waste. You can just see the drums there, the way they're stacked inside one of the panels. And Katie just showed me a picture of an issue that they had there with a partial collapse of some of the salt falling down into the panels, and I'll talk about that here in a couple slides. And that's just an ongoing maintenance type issue that they have to deal with, because one of the reasons that this location was selected down there at Carlsbad is because the whole purpose of the salt is for it to slowly encroach on the waste and just envelop the waste. And so if that's the whole purpose, that continues every day. So they have to constantly shave off that salt that's encroaching into these panels, and you got to constantly make sure that You know, you have to put bolts and screens to hold up the salt so it doesn't fall down. And I'll talk a little bit more. Okay, so here's the challenges, and just as I'm talking about, you see right here, and it's on your picture, these are the examples of as the salt encroaches, it causes the bolts, the roof bolts, they're drilled up into the ceiling, and you can see the screens here to hold it. Here's another example of the roof bolt where it's come loose from the bolt itself, and then you can see they call them floor heaves. See where you got cracks in there, and that's just the natural ongoing operations. Well, I talked about one of the issues is being able to do all of the operations. The two events, one of them was a fire in one of the machines that was below ground, and then of course the other was the drum event. So in this case here, you cannot necessarily go back in there and use the diesel equipment that was being used prior to that. So this is an example of the technology they've been using. This here is a hybrid bolter. So it is a electric powered. That way you don't have to worry about the fumes and the emissions, carbon dioxide and so forth coming from your diesel equipment. So safety, of course, takes precedence over there, and everything I'm talking about here is what they call ground control. They constantly have to go in there every day and look at, and you can imagine for how large this facility is, they have to go in and constantly every day go and fix, use the bolter to go and either replace these or put new ones in, take care of these different floor heat, so forth and so on. So right now, you basically have a choice. How much waste emplacement can you do versus how much maintenance that you have to do of this nature, and this here is what the priority is, okay? Because you only have so much ventilation to have people doing both. So this is where the priority is right now, okay? So what you want to look on, I think the next page after this, you have a picture of the panels. So you might want to kind of, as I'm talking about this, it's hard to go just with this if you're not looking at that next, the next slide. So here we're talking about what's going to happen from a waste handling perspective. I talked a little bit about the maintenance. So the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to have to they're going to go and put waste in panel 7, rooms 1 through 5. So if you look on that next page, you'll see it's the red ladder type thing at the bottom of the page. That's panel 7, and I'll talk more when I get to that one there. And you can see there it should show rooms 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that's where the waste is going to go. And that area, as you can see on that slide, is red. That means it's contaminated. Prior to this event, WIPP was a clean facility. So everything was done there, folks not in any sort of airborne respirators or anything like that. All that's going to change here in these certain areas, and that's where you can see here, they'll have to work in the PAPRs, the air purifying respirators, okay? So panel 7, rooms 1 through 5. Going to this here, a little bit of background, this yellow right here, that's where the drum was that had the deflagration event, which then kind of makes sense that panel 7 there being red is contaminated because you had a spread of airborne contamination. Then as you go up through here, you'll see this is the path that was the exhaust. This is the corridor, and that's why you see on your sheet that's red, because as that air was pulling that airborne contamination to the exhaust stack, it contaminated that entire line there, okay? And these here, all of these people are in all of those areas, okay? So just kind of go back for a background, now that you know that as the basis. All of these gray are panels that are already filled. The gray indicates filled. The white up here is rooms, areas of panel 1 that were just abandoned. They didn't tell me exactly why they abandoned them, but basically they're not available. So what you're left with here is you got panel 7 that's already mined out. This is panel 8. It's only partially mined out. So when we start emplacing waste back into WIPP, that's why they're going to be operating in a contaminated area, because it's going to take a while to be able to mine out panel 8, okay? So what you see on this chart here is all this area here and this, I don't know, what is it, orange on your, that's a controlled area. It's not contaminated. So that's just making sure that there's no spread of contamination. Again, this is the highly contaminated area. All this in yellow is contaminated as well. So this green area right here, going to this little circle, is where they'll be doing the transition from a clean area into the contaminated area of the place waste. So you can see on this picture here, these are folks, and again, this is training. They're not doing anything, you know, right now. And so they're practicing for as you go from bringing the waste down and you bring it to this area here, you then have to hand it off to the folks who are operating in the personnel equipment, personal protection equipment, to go and start filling up these areas here. It's anticipated it's going to take 3 years to fill up panel 7, and then of course that means by that time you're going to have to start mining out panel 8 as well. Doug, you had a question.
What's the status of room 6 panel?
Panel 6, that's panel 6 right there.
No, I'm sorry.
It's all filled.
Panel,
All these are filled.
panel 7.
Panel 7 here.
6. Excuse me. Panel 7, room 6. What's that?
Okay, right here,
Yeah.
there has been a explosive barrier placed over here, which is why this area all here on this bottom, I don't know if if there's a, you can kind of see it, it's a hash marked over on there on your paper. So this is not going to be used anymore down here. So that's why you're limited to rooms 1 through 5 up here for the.
It's closed off.
It's closed off.
6 and 7 are
Yes.
closed off.
Yep. Everything below there is closed off. So you're left with 5 rooms here, 3 years, and then you got to be back into mining so that you can do waste emplacement at those. Now, of course, all of this depends on what rate shipments are received, what sort of emplacement rates you can do, and then, of course, I'll talk a little bit if there's any above ground temporary waste placement.
Okay, so
And Helka.
Doug, you talked about how they're doing a lot of maintenance just to keep the salt from growing, I guess. Is the final plan to let the salt encapsulate the waste?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the rooms that are full, is that happening right
Yep.
now?
As even now, it's enclosing upon for those like we're talking about for these here, because they're full, so you're not going to do any salt shaving or anything like that.
So it's really area 7 that you're doing the maintenance right
Yep,
now? Okay.
that you need to do that. And then, of
Thank you.
course, any of these corridors, because the same thing is happening in all those corridors as well. Okay? So as part of, yes, ma'am.
So if room 7 is contaminated, how are they going to be able to still go in and put more?
Because they're going to be in protective closure. See this here? This is what they're going to be wearing right here. So that's what they're going to be there, and that's why this here is the area that separates the contaminated area. You see the green is the clean. So they'll bring it down here through this clean area, and on this point here is the separation where you're seeing these folks practicing right here. So the folks inside this area, there'll be what they call step-off pads. So that's where, and these are what all these signs indicate, is once you go inside here, you now need to be suited out like this here with your respirators and so forth, and they will take the waste and take it down here and put it into these different rooms that are contaminated.
And how long do you think it'll take them to finish room 8?
3 years.
You planning additional rooms besides room 8?
You're saying, is this the last one, panel 8 here? Or one?
Under construction. Are they
Okay,
gonna
this
do
here, yeah,
more
this is,
besides that one?
yes. There's additional panels, 9, 10, so forth like that. And one of the questions been asked is, you know, why go back and do this for panel 7? Why not just do panel 8 and then go to panel 9 and 10? It's very expensive. And so from a safety, from a expense and so forth, it's been determined that that area you can safely do operation. We do operations in contaminated areas on sites throughout the Department of Energy. So with the training and with the safety precautions, it's safe to go in and do this. The other issue comes, if not, you're talking years just of doing additional mining before you can start waste emplacement. So right now the decision has been made, we're going to go and do operations in contaminated areas in order to get WIPP back up, removing waste.
Doug?
Yes,
With
sir.
that in mind, so panel 8, you'll begin mining when panel 7 is full? And will operations then shut down again?
Yeah, and that's, again, goes back to my comment about the ventilation. You know, you need certain types of equipment, and the ventilation flow needed for the mining is going to take up the amount of ventilation, and I'll get to it later. That's why there's an additional supplemental ventilation system that needs a new shaft drilled and so forth. Until you get all of that done, you're limited to trade off. How much am I going to do for mining? How much am I going to do for the maintenance? How much am I going to do for the waste emplacement? So that's what they're trying to do now, is to balance that. And this impacts the question Nona had, is shipments, okay? Because you just can't take the shipments down there and just leave the waste above grade. So that's what they're trying to balance as we go forward. And I'll get into that a little bit more in the later slides.
Another question. What is the change in cost and time, having gone from clean operations to this operating in a contaminated area where you have to hand off the waste, give it to somebody else, they have to suit up? There's clearly a lot more effort involved in emplacing a drum in this new system.
Yeah, and I'll have Lee write that one down, because all I will tell you is from that cost-benefit analysis, which includes the cost of the operations, the cost of any of the protections, the safety precautions, and again, this program, because it's a national true program, takes into account the costs associated with all the generator sites. So that cost-benefit has been done to say that it is safe, and it's better for the department to go and put it in that contaminated operations. I don't know exactly what the numbers come out to.
I guess nobody's done it. If they've done a comparison between what they were doing 3 years ago and how this will operate.
Yeah, and what you're going to see in my next couple slides is there's significant changes about the way operations are being done in the past versus going forward. And that's what this whole event has also revealed, that we needed to change the way operations were done. So here, the first thing is, you can see that there's the due enhanced federal oversight. There's the Carlsbad field office, when we're talking about here, and then the EM headquarters. There's been a national true program, and then there's been the Carlsbad field office. Over the past 20 years, the Carlsbad field office did both of them. And in reality, the result of this event said, you need to make sure that they're completely separate. So the National True Program has a program manager back in headquarters, and their job is to make sure that the waste acceptance criteria, to make sure that the way the program is run, the generators are being certified, is all done separately from the Carlsbad field office, who then is responsible for executing the receipt and placement of the waste. So the results were, there was a little bit, because they were both being done by the same group, that there might have been some of the operations above the safety. And so that's what this separation is, to make sure that, the Carlsbad field office concentrates on executing, True program concentrates on making sure the program is run safely and effectively. Okay? Next thing, some of the additional enhancements. New waste acceptance criteria. And you can go down there, it talks about, we just got this waste acceptance criteria on June 27th. What that means is all the waste that all the generators have to go back and look at all the waste streams and how we packaged and remediated the waste, and compare it again to this new waste acceptance criteria, which means if it doesn't match the new waste acceptance criteria, it's not going anywhere. So every single waste stream at every single site has to go through this, and you can see it incorporates the documented safety analysis from WIPP, and what they did was they said all of you waste generators are decertified, which is the common sense thing to do, until you can demonstrate that you're going to be remediating the waste to meet that new waste acceptance criteria. We're not going to let you certify the waste to go down to WIPP. Yes, sir. Carlos.
Thanks, Doug. Does that include the TRU that's already at Andrews?
Yeah, you're talking the waste control specialist in
Waste
Texas.
control specialist?
That includes every single waste that is going down to WIPP has to go through that.
That new WAC?
Yeah.
So that means, just guessing here, but going to have to get shipped probably back to Los Alamos to get repackaged, maybe?
Not necessarily. And again, as they go through and review, and based on this new waste acceptance criteria, we know that we have three different types of waste down in waste control specialists, and so some of that waste may still meet the new waste acceptance criteria, can go straight into WIPP. Others, because one of the things that we've talked about before is we have 100 or so drums, 113, that are the same nitrate salt drums that we have here. So that obviously cannot go down there. So we have to figure out what we're going to do with that. But some of the waste, if it meets the waste acceptance criteria that's anywhere, including the waste control specialist, we'll be able to go down to WIPP when shipments start up again.
Doug, rest it up and you can continue. Thank you. Questions? Nona.
Yes, thank you. Back to the part about the mining and the ventilation and all. Is the mining equipment also going to be electric, and does that allow for it to operate with a little bit less need for airflow than the diesel equipment might?
Yeah, and just like everything they're using down there, they're trying to see how can they maximize that use of the ventilation. So, the mining equipment, the bolting equipment, everything that they can, they're trying to convert it or change it to some other mechanism. So yeah, they've looked at that. I don't know, what percentage they've shifted over, but they have looked at all of that.
Max?
Thank you, Doug. I have a question. I have your July 27th presentation, or not your presentation.
Is that mine?
No, it's
okay.
Not yours. I know you're new on the block on this presentation. But I'm a little perplexed because you're looking from the July 27th to this, you're 2 months, and yet we're getting a very thorough update on WIPP. But yet you look at that interim ventilation project, that has been in the works for months now, and same thing within how they're handling the radioactive waste. And so how much more do we not know at this point that we're going to see a report maybe in another 2 months is going to reveal here's a lot more of the operation? Is it because it's the sensitivity of bringing the operation back up? Is it classified information? Why are we seeing these types of developments now rather than 2 months ago?
That one I can't answer, other than the fact that probably the biggest impact that you had was that documented safety analysis. When I said that didn't get finished until the April timeframe, it didn't get implemented until the May timeframe, you then have to go back at that point and redo all the procedures. Then you have to go and do the practice. So the big difference between then and now was to figure out exactly what are all the changes that we're going for all the procedures, configuration control, quality assurance, and now they have a better handle because they, one of the things I showed is they've done the cold operations, and they were looking at that taking 8 weeks and it took them 12 weeks. So because they were implementing all of those new changes, they now have a feel for how long it's going to take them, based on those cold operations, for how long it's going to take them to do the readiness aspects. The formal, we talked about the MSA, talked about what's going to be the operational readiness review. So the difference that I would say between then and now is that they have a much better handle on what the actual effort is going to be required. You know, up before it was theoretical. You say, you know, I need to make sure that I'm doing things safely. Well, what does safely mean until you translate it into all the actual procedures? So that's what I see. And the reason I say that is because I've heard all these presentations over these last months as well from Todd Schrader, the Carlsbad manager. And that's what I see is they've got better definition on exactly what needs to be done going forward.
Thank you for that explanation. I'm just looking from my position as a citizen advisory, and when I'm asked about questions about this, if we had this information saying it's a lot more complex because we needed to add another ventilation system because of the contaminants. It's the shafts that they're having to deal with. They have to gear up and put contaminant. They have to practice that. When you talk about the accident, and today we're finally getting real details why it's taking so long to open it up. Well, yeah, you have to make it safe. You had to put this stuff in. And so in future presentations, I hope they can bring that information so that when we get questions from constituents that are concerned about this type of facility, we have better information to relay it to the different constituents. Thank you.
Understand.
Thank you, Max. Stephen?
No,
oh,
not ready.
No question. Okay.
So again, I talked about here that the new waste acceptance criteria and how all the waste generators are going through the process of getting recertified. In addition to that, as you can imagine, because of the drum that went in there and the constituents in that drum, we now have a enhanced acceptable knowledge process. And basically what that is it's looking at where did the waste stream come from to make sure you know exactly what the material is. And what you have here is a picture of an x-ray of a drum with the different things in there. So you take the characterization data as far as you take what's in the x-ray, what's in your, maybe in your headspace gas analysis, what's the historical data from where it is to find out you know exactly what the constituents is. So that's been beefed up. And then the other issue, which is directly because of the event, is chemical compatibility. You know, you got to make sure that what's in that drum, you know, does not have a chemical reaction such as what we had with the drum that we sent down there. So that's another big effort that they're doing, is a lot of research to make sure that the acceptable chemicals combined in those drums will not cause some sort of reaction that would impact the drum itself, which makes sense. Again, here's additional, yeah.
Just a question. Sorry. Is each site doing this kind of analysis? I mean, I know what Los Alamos is doing, and I saw some of that operation, but like Idaho and Oak Ridge and Savannah River, are they also doing this for their particular waste?
Yeah, a lot of what this I'm talking about you see here is the Enhanced National True Program. So when they separated out, you know, when I said the Carlsbad from the National True Program, the experts in the National True Program are doing a lot of this research, and then what they'll do is they'll incorporate it into the waste acceptance criteria, or the whatever you know, that we get as the generator. It's not expected that each of the sites will do their individual researches. They do the research for the entire True Program, and then the criteria is placed on us. So they will say your waste streams cannot have these sorts of chemicals. Like right now, part of the criteria is you can't have, you know, things such as aerosol spray cans. It means if you got that in there, you got to puncture them so that there's no, that's the sort of thing. National True Program will put these requirements onto the generators.
Thank you.
And Lee, make sure when I say something wrong, you correct me. So I must be doing pretty good. He hadn't corrected me yet. He's admonished me once or twice, but not corrected me. Okay, so again, we're going back there, oxidizing chemicals, and you see what this basically says is with our drum, we put a fuel, you know, in there with the chemical, an oxidizer, and therefore that's what caused that chemical reaction. So there's a lot more information or a lot more knowledge of oxidizing chemicals, which you would be expected as a result. New generator site technical reviews. The folks are going to be coming to each of the sites to do a assessment to make sure that each of the sites can be recertified to meet the new waste acceptance criteria. And then there again, the audits, we're right now working with Carlsbad as they're going through all of these changes to the National True Program to understand when we can get certified to ship. And that goes back to Nona's question about who ships what when, because no one's shipping until you're certified to ship. And so that also means what order do you go and get these audits done. Resumption of the waste placement. Okay. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take the waste that is stored in the waste handling building at WIPP, and you're going to take it and place it down into the panel. That's the first thing that's going to be done. Okay? And then you will see there the expectation is that with the balancing of what needs to be done from that maintenance with waste and placement, that you're going to have 5 shipments a week. So your recommendation about the priorities of Lano, and you can also imagine there are other sites, and every single site feels they should be number 1. You know, I've heard the statement from Idaho, right, that Lano is the folks who caused the issue, so they should go to the back of the line. I said, you know, and I talked to the guy from Idaho, and I said, well, you know, me personally, I would tell you, you could tell your Attorney General that we own Carlsbad WIPP in New Mexico, right? So the state of Mexico gets to have a say into what goes down to WIPP in what order. So all of that is being worked out right now. You got agreement, you got regulatory agreements in Idaho, you got other considerations in Oak Ridge and Savannah River. So they're all, we have the waste at the waste control specialist. So we're looking at all of that, and sometime in the next month or so, I think they're supposed to be putting together a prioritization plan of what's going to be shipped. But it's going to be based on 5 shipments a week. Actually, we're only going to schedule for, I think, 4 shipments a week, with the 5th one being a, you know, based on what the needs are of the program to do that 5th shipment. And that is going to be the expected rate until the new supplemental ventilation system comes in. That's the planning basis. I think, and help me with this, Lee, before the event, we had been shipping as many as, I think, 30 to 35 shipments a week. The new plan, once we get all the ventilation, is planning on about 17 to 20, I think. Is that?
Yeah, as far as we in DOE, the WIPP facility, they were accepting up to 18 CH shipments, and then there was another potentially 12 or so RH shipments. RH remote handle's been postponed while they figure out how to readdress that. But Lano alone had, I think our record was 11 shipments in 1 week.
Okay. So you can see for the next significant period of time, from when it opens in that beginning of 17, calendar year 17 time frame, until the 22-ish time frame, you're talking limited shipments of about 5 a week. Okay.
A couple other questions, Doug. One from Max, and then one from Ella.
So Doug, I just want to make sure the waste handling building, that waste that's there meets this new WAC revision 8. So it's been sitting there, been certified and gone through the oxidation. So you don't put stuff down there and then have a reaction, then you have...
Exactly. So again, that's another part of the balancing equation, because they're still doing some of the R&D on the oxidizing and the things. They put out a new waste acceptance criteria. So yes, before any of that gets placed from above to below, it's going to have to go through all of the new WAC requirements, any of the additional requirements based on the compatible chemicals and so forth. But you're exactly right. We will not do it until they're assured that those drums, any drum, whether it's there at WCS or at any of the generator sites, meets all of the requirements.
So this question goes on to Lee. How many of our containers that are sitting at Los Alamos ready to ship already at that WAC 8 compliance?
They're doing that analysis now, so they're re-looking at everything. The drums at WIPP, those were previously certified, and a portion of the drums at WCS keep their certification. They're going back in re-verifying those, but there is a small exception for drums that had already or were already in transit when the event happened. So they are going to review all the drums at WIPP above ground, our drums, Idaho drums. It looks like we have no problematic drums from Los Alamos in the above ground at WIPP. We verified that. So they'll put it through what they call the enhanced AK and go ahead and hopefully dispose of everything above ground at the WIPP site as a priority to clear the decks of the container storage building.
Because the more our containers that are WAC 8 compliant as compared to the other labs, then it's going to put us up and saying, hey, we're ready to go. If you start shipping at 5, we could be stacking them up.
So if I could speak to the reality of how this is truly going to work, when WIPP reopens and we start shipping from Los Alamos, we're competing with ourselves with the newly generated waste at TA55. And they've been filling up the closets, not literally, but they've been filling up all their storage areas as practical, and they're running out of space, and the new true waste storage facility hasn't opened yet. So the priority at Los Alamos, we will have some drums to put towards shipments in the next couple of years, but mainly as the new contractor comes in and they process our remediated salts, we're going to be getting waste ready at EM, while the NNSA folks are ready to ship now under the enhanced AK, Acceptable Knowledge Program. And so there's a true mission needs at Los Alamos to clear the decks over at TA55 to kind of do things, which is okay because my lines have been down for a couple years right now. They're kind of in warm standby. I've got to go through Readiness. I've got to bring the new contractor on, go through Readiness, get all the drums out of 375, the Permacon, so I can use it, right? Go to 231 and get it operational again and get all the drums that are stored in there. So we've got to get these nitrated salts under our belt, compliantly processed to the WIPP WAC, and then as the new contractor comes in next year, about this time in transition, he's got to really roll up his sleeves and get the lines operational again, because they truly, Wicker will be operational where we'll do the remediated salt drums, the salt drum, right? But the other two principal lines have been offline. I've got to go through a full readiness just like they did, which is okay, because that gives NNSA time to clear the deck. So I won't be competing with NNSA over the next couple of years. They'll ship a few of our drums to make a full shipment. But really, it's going to be NNSA clearing the deck over the next couple of years once they open.
You know, the other thing that also plays in there that folks don't quite think about is, you know, when you're talking shipments, you have priority of shipments, and then there's realities. Well, one of the realities is you can say that Idaho shipments have a priority, but you can't ship from Idaho in the winter. It's not feasibly possible. When I was at Savannah River, we were almost last on the priority list, but you know what? You can ship from Georgia any time of the year. And so when all the other sites couldn't ship in the winter time, shipments went there. So you're going to see that same sort of thing with us here, because we would still be able to ship. And so we might, on an ad hoc basis, become the highest priority just because we can ship. No.
And Helen? Oh. Okay.
Mine is easy. How many drums per shipment?
It's not that easy, because depending on the configuration that you have in there, but you roughly look at it and say, because you have 3 true packs, that you're talking somewhere around 30 to 40 drums.
Thank you.
Nona?
So to kind of put some of this in perspective, what percentage of the waste that's already stored underground at WIPP is from Lanol, and then can you break that down into legacy waste and the newly generated waste stream?
You're talking about waste already at WIPP that's already in place? Yeah, we'll have to go back and get that. I have no idea. And again, it's going to be a little difficult when you're saying legacy waste versus the new gen. I guess we can do that, because that differentiation really occurred when you created our environmental management office, with the legacy being called pre-1999 and new gen post-1999. But I'm sure we can get some sort of figures on that.
But was the 3706 was all legacy waste?
No, actually, it was a combination of newly generated waste and legacy waste. And an approximate number, I would say about 10% of the total waste underground at the WIPP facility would be from Los Alamos. As far as the split between newly generated and legacy waste, I'll get that for you.
And again, of the waste that's sort of been waiting for WIPP to reopen from all the sites around the country, is that still the 10% is from Los Alamos, or do you know
the
that?
The 10% at WIPP would be from Los Alamos. As far as what's waiting, we're probably a little less than that now. The Idaho backlog is tremendous. It's probably 3 or 4 times or 5 times what we have as far as available material.
And I'm not sure if this is exactly related, but could someone clarify about what's meant by the 5,000 cubic meters of waste to be transported from, or cleaned up, or whatever it's supposed to be from Los Alamos? And is that waste as it sits in and on the ground, or waste as it will be when properly packed into drums and other containers? Or
Let me talk to that on my agency update, because I'll talk to life cycle cost estimate and narrative description. Okay, so I'll get to that on the next part of my presentation. All righty. So again, the other aspect of this is in order to kind of even out the flows, because you can't go and continuously receive waste and then place it below ground. They have to take pauses for, might have to do maintenance on ventilation, but they want to be able to continue to ship waste to WIPP. And so what they're looking at doing is having an above ground temporary storage project. And I'm well familiar with these concrete overpacks because I used to have them at Savannah River. And so what it allows is, if they have, I was talking about 17 a week, what they're trying to do is have a surface storage capacity where you could have 408 of these containers. That way you would be able to take an entire shipment, or entire years of shipment, and if the WIPP underground is not available, you would be able to store them temporarily above ground. And the big thing about that is that you would have to, it has to be a permit modification class 3, which Katie can talk all about that. That's a couple-year process to go through a class 3 permit modification. But here's what you're looking at. This here is pad 1 at Savannah River. These are the containers they're talking about, and that it would just be a permit mod to have some sort of you can see just like this was nothing but a concrete pad. This was actually from the mid-1990s because we actually buried those below ground. So this is what the concept would be, is to have above ground storage that could take as much as 1 year's worth of shipments. And then, as they ramp up their waste emplacement, they would take and put it below ground. So that's in the works right now. And then the last thing, talk about for the new change, this is the permanent ventilation system. It's a new shaft. They have to dig a new shaft in there, 55,000 square foot building, and that airflow will increase the airflow to somewhere around, I believe, 400,000 cubic feet per minute. It's a huge increase. Once you get that project done, that's when you're talking about that you can increase the shipments. This project here is somewhere in the tune of $350 million-ish to do this here, and that's a capital asset project that won't be completed till the 21-22 timeframe. That's why the shipments won't increase to that maximum number until that timeframe. And that's all I have.